You click because you're 60 or older, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you already suspect there's money with your name on it sitting just out of reach. You're right. There are Centrelink payments, supplements, and exemptions that most pensioners never claim, worth thousands of dollars a year, and the system is quietly built so you never go looking for them. I spent decades inside the money world watching this paperwork flow across my desk every single day. Before we're done, I'll show you one exemption buried in the Social Security Act that can lift your pension as soon as this fortnight. And it works even if you're already retired and already drawing a payment right now. Let me start with something that almost no pensioner I've ever spoken to understood properly, even though it could be putting real cash back in their pocket today. It's called the work bonus. Now, you might be thinking, I'm retired, I don't work, that's not for me. Hold on, because that one assumption is exactly what the system counts on you making. The work bonus lets a person of pension age earn money from work without it reducing their pension the way you'd expect. And here's the part they bury in the fine print. Every eligible pensioner has what's called a work bonus income bank. And as of recent rules, it starts with a $4,000 balance sitting there automatically. You didn't earn it. You didn't apply for it. It's just there, waiting. The first $300 a fortnight you earn from working doesn't count towards your income test at all. And if you don't use it, it banks up fortnight after fortnight, all the way up to a balance of $11,800. I watched people in their late 60s take a few shifts at the local club, do a bit of casual work, mind a shop a couple days a week, and panic that Centrelink would slash their pension. It didn't, because that income vanished into the work bonus before the income test ever saw it. Think about what that means. You could earn thousands of dollars a year on top of your full pension and lose nothing. The bloke down the road who picks up weekend work and the woman who does a bit of bookkeeping from home, if they understood this, they keep every cent of their pension and pocket the wages on top. So why doesn't anyone tell you this clearly? That's the question that started to bother me years ago. And the answer is the first crack in a much bigger wall. Because here's what I noticed from the inside. The rules that help you are written in dense gray language, buried 6 pages deep in a guide nobody reads. But the rules that reduce your payment, those get applied automatically, instantly, without you lifting a finger. The system is fast when it takes and slow when it gives. That's not an accident. That's design. And nowhere is that clearer than with something called deeming. Now stay with me, because this one is costing pensioners money right now and almost none of them realize it. Deeming is the rule Centrelink uses to guess how much income your savings and investments earn. Notice the word I use, guess. They don't look at what your money actually earns. They assume a rate, they call it the deeming rate, and they treat your savings as if they earn that, whether they really do or not. Here's where it gets quietly painful. For years, when interest rates at the bank were sitting near nothing, when your term deposit was paying you barely anything at all, the deeming rates were frozen at levels set back in 2020. The lower deeming rate sat at 0.25%, the upper rate at 2.25%. So your money in the bank might have been earning you next to nothing in real life, but Centrelink was deeming it to earn more and reducing your pension based on income you never actually received. Let that sink in. You were assessed on money you didn't earn. And when you lose pension because of deemed income that doesn't exist, that's not a small thing. For a couple with a few $100,000 in savings, the gap between what they really earned and what they were deemed to earn could quietly cost them a meaningful slice of their fortnightly payment. Who benefits from that confusion? Not you. The complexity itself is the trap. Because a rule this fiddly, this technical, this boring, most people just shrug and accept whatever number Centrelink hands them. They assume the computer's right. I used to assume the computer was right too, until I started checking the workings and saw how often the assumptions ran against the ordinary person and almost never in their favor. But here's where the deeming story turns, and this is the part you can use. The deeming thresholds change. As a single pensioner, only the amount of your financial assets above a certain threshold gets deemed at the higher rate. Below that threshold, it's deemed at the lower rate. And those thresholds move every year. If you don't keep up, you could be sitting on the wrong side of an old number. More importantly, deeming only applies to financial assets. Your bank accounts, your shares, your super in the right phase, your managed funds. It does not apply to everything you own. And that single distinction between what gets deemed and what doesn't is a door. Walk through it the right way, and you can legally reshape how Centrelink sees your money. I'll show you exactly how before we finish, because that's where the real exemption lives. But first, I need to talk to you about a card, because while everyone's arguing about the pension, there's an entitlement sitting next to it that thousands of self-funded retirees throw away every year without realizing. It's the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. And the reason this matters is simple. A lot of people assume that if they've got too much money for the age pension, they've got too much money for any help at all. That assumption is wrong, and it's an expensive wrong. The Commonwealth Seniors Health Card isn't tied to the assets test the way the pension is. There's no assets test on it at all. It runs on an income test, and the income thresholds were lifted significantly. As of the changes that came through, a single person could have adjusted taxable income up around the $99,000 mark and still qualify, and a couple combined up near the $158,000 region. Those are not small numbers. That means a retiree who's done reasonably well, who's got their own super pension taking over, who never thought of themselves as needing a concession could still qualify. And what does the card actually give you? Cheaper prescriptions under the PBS, a lower safety net threshold, so once your medicine costs hit a certain point in the year, they drop further, access to bulk billed appointments where doctors offer it, and depending on your state and the time, various concessions on things like energy, rates, and transport. Plus, there's an energy supplement that can be paid to card holders. Now, here's the insider bit. Your income for this card is based largely on your adjusted taxable income and, crucially, on a deemed amount from account-based income streams in many cases, not the full drawdown. The way your super pension is assessed for this card can work very differently from how you'd assume, which means people who think they earn too much sometimes don't once it's actually calculated the way the rules require. I watch people leave that card on the table for years paying full price at the chemist the whole time simply because nobody sat them down and ran the real numbers. So that's three things already: the work bonus, the deeming thresholds, and the health card that the system never puts in front of you in plain English. Therefore, the obvious question becomes, how much else is sitting there and what can you actually do about it if you're already retired? And that's exactly who I want to talk to now. Because everything I've just walked you through, the work bonus, the deeming traps, the health card that most retirees don't even know they qualify for, this is only part of what I've put together for Australian seniors who are done being kept in the dark. I've spent years turning all of this into a clear step-by-step resource called the Pension Blueprint, and it's part of a complete collection I call the Complete Senior Money Field Edition, available right now for $97 through the link in the description. It covers every major lever in this guide and dozens more, written in plain English, built specifically for people already in retirement. If you want the full picture in one place, rather than piecing it together one YouTube video at a time, that's where it lives. The link is below. But back to the person I was speaking to a moment ago, the one who retired years ago and thinks the dice are already cast. Because if you've been listening and thinking, this is all well and good, but I retired years ago, my pension's already set, it's too late for me to change anything. I need you to lean in, because this next part was built for you specifically. It is not too late. That belief that once you're retired, the dice are cast is one of the most expensive ideas in this whole country. The truth I learned is that your Centrelink assessment is not a one-time stamp. It's a living file. It updates, it responds, and there are levers an ordinary retired person can pull this month with no financial advisor, no new investment, and no risky scheme that change what lands in their bank account. Here's the first one. Reassessment. Most people never tell Centrelink when the value of their assets goes down. They're quick to report when something goes up because they're scared of an overpayment. But the car you bought 8 years ago, it's worth a fraction of what it was. The household contents, the furniture, the white goods, the old Telly Centrelink counts these at secondhand garage sale value, not what you paid. And most pensioners have these listed far too high from years ago and never corrected them. If your assessed assets are sitting higher than what your stuff is actually worth today, you may be getting less pension than you're entitled to right now. A simple call to update those values can move your payment. That's not a trick. That's just claiming the truth that the system never prompts you to update. Here's the second lever. Advance payments. If you're on the full pension, you can ask Centrelink to pay you a portion of your pension in advance as a lump sum, and it's not a loan from a bank, it's your own pension money brought forward with no interest charged. They then recover it gradually from your future payments. Now, that's not free money, and I'd never pretend it is, but if you're staring down a big one-off cost of dental bill, a car repair, getting the hot water system fixed before winter, an interest-free advance of your own entitlement beats the alternatives most people reach for. And almost nobody knows it exists until they're desperate. Here's the third, and this one surprises people. Gifting. There are rules about giving money away, and if you don't understand them, you can accidentally hurt your pension, but if you do understand them, they become a tool. You're allowed to gift up to $10,000 in a single financial year and up to $30,000 over a rolling 5-year period without it affecting your pension. Anything above those limits gets treated as though you still own it for 5 years. They call it a deprived asset, and it keeps getting deemed against you. So the strategy isn't to suddenly hand everything to the grandkids. The strategy is to understand that planned, measured gifting within those limits can gently reduce your assessable assets over time in a way that's completely allowed. Done right, helping your family and improving your own position aren't opposites. So now you've got reassessment, advance payments, and gifting, 3 moves any retired person can make without becoming a finance expert. But I promise you something bigger. I promised you one exemption buried in the rules that can lift your pension this fortnight. And I've held it until now on purpose, because once you understand everything we've covered, the assets test, deeming, the difference between what's counted and what isn't, this last one finally makes sense. Here's the situation almost nobody explains to you. The age pension assets test works on a taper. Once your assessable assets go above the threshold for your situation, your pension reduces by $3 per fortnight for every $1,000 you're over. $3 a fortnight might sound small, but run the math. That's $78 a year for every single $1,000 of excess assets. $10,000 over the line, and you're losing $780 a year. $20,000 over, and it's more than $1,500 a year gone every year for as long as those assets sit there being counted. So the whole game, if you're near that threshold, is this: can you legally move money out of assessable assets without actually giving it away or wasting it? And the answer the system never advertises is yes. There's a category of asset that Centrelink does not count at all, up to a generous limit, and it's not some exotic investment. It's a funeral bond. Stay with me, because this is the part that changes things. Under the rules, money you place into a funeral bond up to an exempt limit that sits around the $15,500 mark, and which is indexed and rises over time, is not counted in your assets test and is not deemed under your income test. It simply disappears from the calculation. It's still your money, set aside for a real future purpose that every single one of us will eventually face. But the moment it goes into that allowable funeral bond, Centrelink stops counting it against your pension. Now think back to that taper. If you're a single pensioner sitting just above the assets threshold, and you move, say, $15,000 of assessable savings into an allowable funeral bond, you've just removed $15,000 from the test. At $3 per fortnight per thousand, that's roughly $45 a fortnight back in your pension, around $1,100 a year. And for a couple, because the exemption can apply to each partner's bond, the numbers can be larger still. $1,100 a year recovered by moving money you were always going to need into a place the system can't touch. This is the exemption I found buried in the Social Security rules years ago. The kind of clause that sits in the legislation under prepaid funeral and funeral bond provisions, written in language designed to make your eyes glaze over. It is not a loophole. It is not aggressive. It is not a scheme some salesman cooked up. It's a deliberate exemption written into the law, but written in a way and surrounded by enough silence that the ordinary retiree never connects it to their own pension. I watch people pay funeral costs out of accessible savings their whole lives, never once told that prepaying that exact expense through an allowable bond could have been lifting their pension the entire time. And it gets one layer better, which is the part that genuinely made me angry when I understood it. A prepaid funeral, where you actually pay a funeral director in advance for a set funeral, is also exempt from the assets test, with no dollar limit on what that funeral itself costs, as long as it's a genuine prepaid arrangement. So between the funeral bond exemption and the prepaid funeral exemption, there's a whole protected space here that the system simply does not point you toward, because pointing you toward it would mean paying you more pension. And the machine, as I learned watching it for decades, is built to be fast when it takes and slow when it gives. Here's exactly what to do with this. First, find out where your assessable assets actually sit relative to the threshold for your situation, single or couple, homeowner or not, because if you're already under the threshold and on the full pension, you don't need this move. And I'd never tell you to lock money away. You don't need to. But if you're above that line or close to it and losing pension to the taper, then a funeral bond from a registered provider kept within the exempt limit is one of the cleanest, safest ways to shift money out of the assessment. Ask whether the bond is an approved funeral bond that qualifies for the Centrelink exemption. That's the specific question that matters. Then report the change, because remember, the system won't recalculate in your favor unless you tell it to. And that's the thread running through everything I've shown you today. The work bonus that earns in the background, the deeming rates that assume income you never received, the health card sitting there for people who think they earn too much, the reassessment, the advance, the gifting limits, and now this exemption that's been sitting in the legislation the whole time. Every one of them has the same shape. The benefit is real, the rule is genuine, and the silence around it is the only reason you didn't already have the money. I want you to sit with what that really means for a moment, because it's bigger than any single payment for years, maybe for your whole retirement. Money that was rightfully yours has been quietly leaking away, not because you did anything wrong, but because nobody whose job it was to tell you ever did. You weren't careless. You were kept in the dark. And the difference between the retiree who knows these rules and the one who doesn't isn't intelligence or luck. It's simply whether someone finally pulled back the curtain. You're the kind of person who pulled back the curtain. You sat through the technical bits, the thresholds and the tapers and the deeming rates, when most people would have clicked away looking for something easier. That tells me something about you. You're not the type to be quietly milked by a system that profits from your silence and counts on your politeness. You're the type who'd rather know the uncomfortable truth and do something with it than stay comfortable and broke. So let me ask you something specific, and I genuinely want your answer. Of everything we covered, the work bonus income bank that starts with $4,000 already in it, the deeming rates that charge you on income you never earned, or the funeral bond exemption that can lift your pension this fortnight, which one had you sitting up and thinking, why has no one ever told me this? Tell me in the comments below. I read them, and I want to know which of these hit hardest. And while you're there, tell me where in Australia you're watching from, because I'm always amazed at how far these rules reach and how many of you have been kept in the dark in every corner of the country. If any of this gave you back something that was quietly being taken, then don't let it stop with you. Subscribe and stand with the retirees who've decided they're done being the last to know the ones taking back what was theirs all along. Because next time, I'm pulling apart the one part of the assets test that punishes you for owning your own home outright, and the perfectly legal way some retirees restructure around it. That one surprised even me when I first saw how it worked from the inside. Don't miss it. Your money's been waiting long enough. But before you go, let me leave you with one more thing, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I stopped here while there's still money on the table. There's a supplement most pensioners receive but never actually understand, and understanding it changes how you use it. It's called the pension supplement, and part of it can be taken as a quarterly lump sum rather than spread across every fortnight. Now, most people never touch this option. They let it dribble in fortnight by fortnight and never think twice. But if you're someone who'd rather have a larger amount land 4 times a year to cover the rates notice, the insurance renewal, the big quarterly bills that always seem to arrive together, you can ask Centrelink to pay the minimum pension supplement quarterly instead. It's the same money. But the timing can be the difference between scrambling and coping. Almost nobody knows they get to choose. And there's the rent assistance trap that quietly costs people too. Plenty of older Australians assume rent assistance is only for people in a standard flat or house. But it can apply to retirement village fees, to site fees in a caravan park or manufactured home estate, to board and lodging in certain arrangements, and to fees in some over 55s communities. I watch people pay those fees for years, never once mentioning them to Centrelink, never realizing that the very payment they were making could have unlocked extra assistance every single fortnight. If you pay any kind of ongoing fee to live where you live, and you're not a homeowner in the strict Centrelink sense, that's a conversation worth having, because the system will never ring you up and offer it. Here's the deeper lesson under all of this, the one I wish someone had handed me decades earlier. Centrelink is not your financial advisor. It was never designed to maximize what you receive. It's designed to process you against a set of rules, pay what the rules force it to pay, and nothing more. The responsibility to claim what's yours sits entirely with you. That sounds harsh, and it is. But once you accept it, it becomes power instead of a burden, because it means the difference between losing money and recovering it is just knowledge, and knowledge is the one thing they can't take back once you have it. So do the small things this week. Pick up the phone and update those asset values. Ask the specific question about whether a funeral bond qualifies for the exemption. Check whether your income really pushes you past the health card cutoff or just feels like it does. Look at whether any fee you pay to live where you live might unlock rent assistance. Each one is a 5-minute conversation. Each one could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars a year, every year, for the rest of your retirement. You waited your whole working life to reach this stage. You paid in year after year through every pay packet and every tax return, trusting that the system would treat you fairly at the end of it. Now it's your turn to make sure it does. Don't leave a single dollar of what's yours sitting in the dark, waiting for someone who was never going to come and find you. Go and claim it. You've earned every cent,